April was an interesting month. April was really tricky because a lot of the books that I had picked, I hadn't realized had very long wait lists on them. I was waiting for The Will of the Many since the beginning of March, I think. And I kept getting it as the Skip the Line. And Skip the Line is kind of like your library's fast reads. You get it for 7 days and then you have to return it. I struggled with stopping and starting a lot of books and feeling a little bit non-linear. I actually started the month really, really well. And I ended up reading the Hopkins manuscript. Now, I started this the day before April started, and I was kind of hoping that it would read really quickly, which it did. I'm so happy that it did. So I ended up having it be my slump cure. I think that was Restoration. This one was definitely a slump cure one. This was a book that I knew I would love. The premise is basically there's this man, he's a retired school teacher and he's been totally into breeding chickens and competing with them. And then he's also a part of the Moon Society. And one day the Moon Society gets this like message that all the calculations are correct and the moon has actually been coming closer and closer to the Earth. Whether or not it got hit on the dark side and we just totally missed it. But eventually the moon will become so close to the Earth it'll get pulled in, and they don't know what it's going to do. They know what day based on calculations. So there's like a day to look forward to. He's got this secret information and it kind of just follows the before, during, and after of that whole thing. This, I think they're calling it a rediscovered classic. Like, I think it was out of print and it was reprinted. Originally called The Ordinary Man. I can totally see why they named it, but I'm so glad they changed it to the Hopkins manuscript. The prologue got me, or the preface. It was basically 200 years after the event of documentarians complaining that their only first-hand account of this whole event was from this ordinary man, and he's super biased and not the best person to have given the account, but they've got it anyway, so here it is. What a historical document, and hilarious. I saw this kind of as funny. The main character, that I'm blanking on his name, he is such a snob. He's not meant to be a likable person. He is so mean about people. He just like the way he describes other people, the way that he thinks about other people, like he's more elite than them. Like, how dare they not recognize his greatness in breeding chickens? He's got his favorite chicken and he's like, oh, she's my best. He's got a very narrow vision of his own world. But ultimately, this book is a little bit about loneliness, and he is very much alone. This is very appropriate for, dare I say it, the pandemic years of you feel very much like you're on an island, but you really are going through similar things with other people. You just have to talk about it and you just have to recognize that. And I really appreciated this one, and I think I'm going to try and find a copy of this physically to own because I liked it so much. This was 5 stars. As per tradition, I read an Agatha Christie, and I found the Taken at the Flood because it was purple and I needed a purple book. Agatha's books are pretty short and very smooth to read. There's something about her writing that's really engaging. This one felt like sort of just an average one for me. Like, I liked it. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it to people, absolutely. There was so many twists and turns in this one that was really enjoyable. I remember reading the beginning of this and kind of just going like, this is overly complicated for how simple it is, but I'll see if I can figure out how to describe it. So there's a woman who's a widow and she marries a rich guy, and he dies in the London Blitz, And so she inherits all of his money. And now she's like a super duper rich woman. And she's a lot younger than he was. His family is really upset because they want all the money. And so there's like hard feelings that she got all the money and they don't get it. So it's kind of like there's grounds for murder. And I'm not going to say too much, but the woman who's a widow, her previous husband, then shows up. And they all thought he was dead. And turns out he wasn't. So I guessed about 50% of the ending. And that made for a really exciting reveal for me. And I really enjoyed it. So this one was 3 stars. Your average Christie. I did manage to read The Will of the Many. I had to keep returning it. I would read it for 7 days and then return it. And then, it would pop up again. I guess people don't really want to read it right now. So I would read for another 7 days and then have to return it. And then just was chipping away at it. This one was 640 pages. So it was a chunker. This was a fantasy book. Yes, Roman inspired. Hierarchy of sorts. And as you get further up in this hierarchy, you have power given to you from the people under you, as much as I kind of understood it. The main character, he's an orphan and he works at several places and he gets adopted by this mysterious man who's very high up in the hierarchy. And this man is basically like, hey, I want you to go to a school for me, but like as a spy. So you're really intelligent and you have to work your way up in the hierarchy that's in this school. So it's like a miniature version of society. You have to work your way up and you have to find out how my brother died. So James Islington, I had read The Shadow of What Was Lost and I thought it was like an average fantasy. I wasn't particularly blown away by the writing or the characters because I felt it was very tropey. There were lots of things that I could predict. Now, that's funny because this one I used as my prediction bingo and I got 14 out of 16 of my predictions right. And I did have to tweak some of them because Islington really surprised me and did like a twist on a thing. So one of the things I had was creature companion. He had a creature companion, but it was like twisted slightly. I really enjoyed how he took a trope and he sort of molded it in such a way that it was familiar yet different. And I really appreciated that with this one. This book reminded me a lot of 2 books. The school had an aspect to it that reminded me a lot of Ender's Game. Now, if you haven't read Ender's Game or The Will of the Many, I'm not going to say much more than that, but there is an aspect in the school in which students engage in that was kind of familiar, and I went, I think I've read this before, but it was different, and so I liked it. The second book that it reminded me of, the magic system, reminded me of the Rune Lords. And the Rune Lords, the magic system is that you can gift certain qualities of yourself to higher ups. So let's say the king requests some beauty. You can give him your beauty. So it takes your beauty away. You kind of look old and haggard and stuff. But then he becomes more shining and more beautiful. Or his intelligence. You give him his intelligence and now you're a dumb bumbling fool and he's really smart. So this was kind of reminiscent of it, except not a lot of the magic system was completely revealed. So I don't mind that. The other aspect of the magic system that I really enjoyed was that it felt very technological, but still kind of magic-y, and I really enjoyed that. This one, if you didn't guess, was a 5 stars from me. I'm so glad I read it. I'm so glad I watched people's top 10s of the year last year to see which book was their top one, and The Will of the Many was at so many people's top, and I can totally see why. All right, Secluded Cabin Sleep 6. Got it on the first try, okay. This is a tongue twister of a title, like, come on. This one I picked because it's got a yellow title, and it was available. So I thought, whatever, I'll try it. This reminded me of Ruth Ware's One by One because it was a bunch of people in a tech company staying in a cabin. So if you like one, you might like the other. I really enjoyed One by One. This one I did not really enjoy. I mean, I listened to the whole thing. This is, it's like a family where they're all kind of interconnected, and there's like a tech company, and they all end up at this cabin, and then things start getting revealed. I did not like how all the reveals were done. The background reveals were very messy, and the pacing was kind of like all over the place. There were a lot of characters, and now it says 6 in the title, which you wouldn't think is a lot to balance. But then she throws in some other characters on the outside, and it's like, why? Why do we need these ones? One thing that I haven't been enjoying with listening to or reading thrillers is this need to create people with irredeemable qualities or nothing redeemable about them. Like, they're absolutely terrible people. Like, all for the sake of drama, I guess. You know, cheating, secret babies, secret identities, a lot of lying and like manipulation, and like, I get that that's part of the genre, but I feel like you can get way more tension doing other things. Like, it's so easy to create tension in a marriage if the man or the woman is having an affair. It's just easy. It's so easy. Like, you could do something totally different to create that same amount of tension, but like the go-to is they had an affair. Yeah, I didn't like it. I don't think I'll read another book by her. This was like her 16th book that she's written. Like, you would think it would be a little bit more tight, and it just wasn't. So that's my main complaint, was that it was a little bit messy all over the place, maybe needed to be cleaned up a little bit in bouncing back and forth between people and the present and past flashbacks. So for that, I ended up giving it a 2 stars. So I begun the Book of Love, and it was a DNF for me. I DNF'd at 10%, which was 3 hours. 3 hours of my life. I just couldn't anymore. Now, I remember why I liked this one. So the premise is that there's these 3 kids that go missing. Nobody knows what happened to them. And then at the beginning of the book, they all show up at their music teacher's classroom, and it's really weird. I'm not sure it was edited enough. It felt a little meandering. It felt like it needed to be just a bit more tight because I wanted it to be way more engaging than it was. I really wanted the music aspect to hit me because I'm a music teacher, and reading a book about another music teacher was going to be interesting, but this was not interesting. It started with a John Cage quote, which had me. Yes, please, thank you. Let's do this. And the language between the teenagers, it was like they were having 5 separate conversations, but we were getting every other sentence, and so nothing was coherent. And maybe that was part of it, but I could not follow it for the life of me. This reminded me of The Starless Sea, in that it wanted to be very beautiful, and it just lacked what the Starless Sea had. The Starless Sea had kind of like a magic to it. The Book of Love had, it was very opaque. There was no shimmer. So I unfortunately had to DNF this one, which then made me panic because I needed to find a book with a circle on the cover. And finally, I did find one. Thankfully, it was a thriller, The Chestnut Man. This is a translated piece of work. This is set in Denmark. On the cover, you can see there's a chestnut with such a circle, but the book cover that I also read had the Netflix adaptation sticker, which is a circle. So it's double circles. This one is like a dark, what do they call it? Nordic noir kind of. And I thoroughly enjoyed this one. There is a woman detective lady who's fantastic, and the man that she's been partnered with, he's kind of been sent from another place because maybe he had his wrist slapped for doing something he shouldn't have. We're not sure. They're solving this mystery of these women going missing, and they're murdered in a very yucky way. And so that was really hard to read, but I couldn't stop. It was so good. And I can see why now it has such high ratings. Like, this is what its rating is on Goodreads. And for a thriller mystery, like, whoa, fantastic. 5 star. And the last one I finished on the very last possible day, and that was Raising Cain. This was my random pick. I picked between 3 books. This is the one that I ended up picking. Can't remember what the subject was for. Inscription, maybe? Anyway, Raising Cain. This is fantastic. There is a little bit of datedness happening with this one. It was published in the year 2000, 1999, in and around there. And so there are some things that definitely speak of the time, but mostly I feel like this is very timeless. The main thesis of this whole book is that we need to equip boys, who then become men, with the language to identify their own emotions. For example, I am angry. Why am I angry? I am angry because I am feeling alone. I am sad. I am sad because I feel like my mom abandoned me. Identifying the why of the big emotion and getting to it, and then moving towards action. All of the boys that he's worked with as a counselor, as a coach, as a teacher, are angry boys who become angry, bitter men. And why? He's got a number of reasons, but his main one is that they cannot identify their main emotion and then work through it. Finding outlets, finding a person, a mentor. I really enjoyed this one. There were great sections, like a whole thing on the relationship between a father and a son, and the relationships between mother and a son. There was really difficult chapters on suicide. There were your typical chapters on drugs and alcohol. And it was just really great to read through. And now I'm curious about finding another book, but now for the girl side. So I read this for my son, and I flagged a bunch of stuff, and I am feeling a bit more equipped. If you've got any recommendations for a book about girls and raising girls, would love them below. This one was a 5 stars. If you can't tell, 5 stars. For a book that I was recommended 14 years ago, fantastic. Yes. Check that one off the list. There you go. Those were the books that I read in April. Twisty turny, and I still managed to get 6 read. My name is Karen. I'm the Book Liberaton. I read all types of books. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.